Oh, howdy all, grab yourselves a beer. It is time for some Path of Exile discussion. We've got a large amount of new information about the Blight League and 3.8 changes, but in particular there was an info dump on 10 of the remaining Divination cards. So there's going to be 18 Divination cards launching in the Blight League, 15 of them are now known. And so I want to go through all 15 that are known so far, give you a bit of a sense of where you want to put them on your loot filters, and discuss where I think they'll be used. So firstly, I want to start with Void of the Elements, which is one of my favourite Divination cards that's been added. You'll notice here that it is for an overpowering opal ring. It's only a magic item, which might sound pretty mediocre until you realise that this is one of the most powerful bases in the game. So opal rings are staggeringly rare, and elder ones are rarer still, of course, and it is item level 100. This means it can roll any mod in the game, current or future, that can roll on elder items, and being an opal ring, it has a very powerful implicit of 15 to 25% increased elemental damage. Overpowering is the highest tier of elemental damage with weapon attacks. And this is not a staggeringly rare roll, although it is pretty rare. Generally speaking, if you had a white opal ring that was an elder item and item level 100, it'll probably take you about 100 alterations in order to roll the overpowering mod, and this is guaranteeing that it comes without a second mod on it. Now there's a couple of places that you could take this. The first one is you could just regal it and then multi-mod it. I don't think this is the right decision, but I'm sure some people will do it. I think what you're going to want to do with this is to augment it and hope to hit a powerful elder mod. If you fail to hit your powerful elder mod, then at that point you may actually just want to use alteration orbs and spam until you get a powerful elder mod. And if you get it with overpowering, that's great, but even if you just get it on its own, it'll be fine. And then at that point you can then regal it and consider multi-modding it, or alternately you can craft it via other means like using fossils. You can potentially get the overpowering mod back by using prismatic fossils. That will make it more likely that you'll get that back. And so there's lots of ways you can do it. And you can also try and craft for a specific, very powerful mod like the Elder Curse on Hit ring mods. Now, in terms of value, currently an Elder Opal ring with item level 100 isn't available in the game, but item level 86 is, and they're functionally equivalent. Actually, you could get it from the Hail Heart. You could get it from the Hail Heart Divination card at the moment, so it's not impossible to get it. But 86 is functionally equivalent. Generally speaking, 86 Elder Opal rings are currently dozens of exalts, but they'll be much more common now that there's a Divination card for them. And I'm expecting that a set of this card will settle somewhere close in price to a set of the Perfection Divination card, which is the Shaper version of this card. And a set of Perfection generally runs around 6 or 7 exalts. So for that reason, each of these cards will be a couple of exalts, and the exact amount will vary. There'll obviously be a little bit of difference in rarity of the cards. Not in rarity, in demand for the two different sets. I'm going to hazard a guess that these are going to drop from Tier 16 Elder Guardians. Clearly there's an Elder theme to the item. Clearly this is a reflection, in a way, of the Shaper version of this, the Perfection card, which drops from the Shaper's Guardians. So I'm going to guess that it's going to drop in Tier 16 maps from Elder Guardians, but that is just me speculating. Next up we have the Damned. This is possibly the most exciting of the rest of the Divination cards. Maybe it is the most exciting of them, actually. So the Damned is for one of the two Vaal Skill Abuse flasks that are linked to the Incursion Temple. Now, if you're not familiar with these flasks, there's two of them. There's Soul Catcher, which is actually the more powerful of the two, but is the more common. And then there is the upgraded version Soul Ripper, which is probably actually less powerful, but is still incredibly powerful and synergizes very well with Soul Catcher. So, let's have a quick look at Soul Catcher first if you're not familiar with it. You can't gain mana during its effect, and your Vaal skills are better, they deal more damage, but the key thing is that they have 25% reduced soul cost during this flask's effect. Now in practice you're not going to cap it at 25%, you're going to be stacking flask effectiveness. If you're using this flask, you probably have somewhere of the order 80% flask effectiveness, on the passive tree from your Ascendancy and from other sources, such as the I believe it's called the Conqueror's Potency unique jewel, one that comes from a quest in Act 8, and a number of other potential sources, like the Alchemist cluster on the tree, and the Elder Belt mods, or a crafted Jun mod. There are several sources of flask effectiveness that you can look for in the game, and you're going to be stacking them. Vile skills used during effect have 40% reduced soul gain prevention duration. Now I'm saying 40%, it's 40 to 20, but if you're going to be using this flask, because it's quite a common flask, you are going to be buying one that has a very, very high roll for this number. Now combined, these allow you to use your Vile skills more often than you normally can. Soul Ripper, it has something different that it does. It gives you this specific mod. So it gives your Vile skills 30 to 40% more damage during a flask effect. Now you're always going to go for 40% there. This flask is so expensive because it's so rare that you will definitely be sinking the, on average, 11 Divine Orbs that are required in order to get it to a perfect roll. Vile skills used during effect do not apply soul gain prevention. This is incredible. It allows you to start recharging your souls immediately. And it is far better than the comparable mod here, which just reduces it by 40%. You cannot get this to 100% by any means. There is not enough flask effectiveness in the game. So for that reason, Soul Ripper is essential if you want to cast a Vile skill and then have the enemies that are killed by that Vile skill immediately start providing you souls for your next one. Very important. This does not gain charges during the effect of any Soul Ripper flask. This means you actively want your Soul Ripper to be 0 quality. Even though it has a couple of mods that are good on it, this is a flask that you want to have very short uptime on. You want to set it off immediately before you cast your Vile skill, and then you just want to wait until after it finishes before you kill more monsters. So for that reason, Soul Ripper is an excellent flask that synergizes very well with the Soul Catcher. The Damned is going to be a quite expensive Divination card. Now in the current league, Legion League that's just ending, Soul Ripper was a 60 Exalt flask. So if that price were to maintain, then this would be a 10 Exalt card. However, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think it'll be closer to 1 Exalt. The precedent that I cite for that is Xerfes' Heart, which is a very powerful amulet that's sourced exactly the same way. It comes from the Incursion Temple, it has a base version, and it has an upgraded version, and the upgraded version requires a staggeringly rare drop from the final boss. Xerfes' Heart was the most expensive item in the game for a short period during the Incursion League. It hit prices that have not been seen before or again for a unique item that was currently available. I'm aware of several of them selling for 4 mirrors, even for 5 mirrors towards the end of that league. Now, that was extraordinary, but for most of that league, Xerfes' Heart was at least a mirror. Now, Xerfes' Heart then got a Divination card, and that Divination card was not as rare as I think many of us expected it to be. And as a result, Xerfes' Heart is now a 5 to 10 Exalt item. It was closer to 5 Exalts this league because it didn't fit into the most powerful Headhunter setups. Like people had worked out that the best way to get Soul Eater on your build was to use the Shaper Amulet Solstice Vigil and to use a Headhunter. It was not to use Xerfes' Heart. Xerfes' Heart is a better way to get Soul Eater in general, but you can't increase the duration of the Soul Eater by as much as you can increase it if it comes from Headhunter. And so for that reason, the Headhunter version was better, and so the wealthiest players didn't try for Xerfes' Heart. Still a very good item. However, the main point that I'm making there is that I expect that the increased supply will crash the price. It will no longer be a 60 Exalt flask, it might be a 10 Exalt flask, it might be a 4 Exalt flask, and this means this card, I would start it as a 1 Exalt card in your loot filter, and then adjust accordingly. Next up we have the Old Man. Side note, this sort of meme card, I thought someone would be a troll and would request Chris Wilson's face on the on here instead of the Templar's face, but any case, that's not what they've done. So fishing is a meme. I could tell you more about it, but then I would get muted for disclosing fishing secrets, and so I will just say this card will be expensive, and you should put it as an Exalt card, as an Exalt teardrop. However, don't expect to see this in normal gameplay. This is probably something that you need to do something very specific in order to make it happen. I could tell you how to make fishing rods drop, but again, I would then be muted for disclosing fishing secrets. Now we have the Skeleton Divination card. This I think is going to be fairly cheap. The reason for that is that it's a very narrow niche to want a Summon Skeletons gem that is not Vile Summon Skeletons, and to also value the quality so much that you would prefer to have a level 20 Summon Skeletons with 23 quality as your highest potential, compared to having a level 21 gem with 20 quality. As your ultimate goal. For that reason, I think that this will be something that solo self-found players might go a little bit gaga over early on if they're planning on using Summon Skeletons and also not using Vile Summon Skeletons because they want to invest their Vile Souls somewhere else. I'm sure there is a niche for that, but I think that will be a very narrow niche, and for most people you would be better off using a 20 quality one and then looking to corrupt it into either a 20-20 Vile Summon Skeletons one day or a 21-20 Summon Skeletons. And ultimately you would want to finish up by acquiring a level 21-23 quality Vile Summon Skeletons, which can come from a few sources of inscribed gems in the game. Places like the Delve Mines very, very rarely have a node called inscribed gems that can drop Vile gems that are 21-23. As well as that Legion content can do so as well, and I assume that the Blight content will too. For loot filter purposes, assume that this card will be worth an Alchemy Orb, and then just make your decisions accordingly. Now we have the Wolf's Legacy, which is for a Vaults of Atzuri that is not corrupted. This I expect will go for a very similar price to the existing Vaults of Atzuri card, so I would just start this as being a 2 Chaos card in your loot filter, so give it whatever sound you would attach to an Apprentice Cartographer Sextant or a Journeyman Cartographer Sextant, and then review during the league as we see how rare the Atzuri Vault actually is, and how many people there are that are doing serious targeting of that zone. There's a number of ways that you can actually target Vaults of Atzuri to try and farm corrupted 6 links, and I haven't really looked into them. I'm aware these strategies exist. I don't know much about them, but there are ways that people go in there with a mindset of, I'm going to force spawn as many 6 links as I can in here, and so those people will be the main people buying these off you in a trade league. If you're in a solo self-found league, this will just help you get that 1 point of Atlas bonus for Vaults of Atzuri, especially if it drops in a target farmable area. Next up we have Vile Power. This is going to be one of the hardest to put a price on. Ancient Doom is a prophecy that upgrades Doomfletch into Doomfletch Prism. Now Doomfletch Prism is a very powerful unique bow, but it's one that's really off meta at the moment. The way that Doomfletch Prism works is, it's a physical damage bow that doesn't do very much physical damage, but then it has the mod, gain 110% of your physical damage as extra cold and lightning and fire damage. This ends up being quite a lot of damage when, not so much from the actual Doomfletch Prism itself. Doomfletch Prism has really bad base damage, but it means that every other source of flat physical damage on your character gets turbocharged. So if you've got, for instance, a Steel Ring that provides flat physical damage, or if you've got the Champion node that provides an enormous amount of physical damage based upon the number of Impale stacks you have on an enemy, then this bow will really perform well in conjunction with that. Now, I'm actually not confident, I'm not sure exactly how because Impale doesn't work very well with conversion, I'm not sure that the Champion node works as well as I think it does, and I would need to test that in Path of Building at some point, when Path of Building supports Impale hopefully in the future. That said, the key question for whether this prophecy is sought after or not is going to come down to 2 things. One, Has the current dexterity stacking version of bow builds, is it still as powerful as it is now, or has it been nerfed? If if that version of dexterity stacking remains, then I can see no place for Doomfletch Prism builds in the game. I just feel they'll just be straight out inferior to cold damage provided from dexterity bows. I think they will just outclass it. So that's the first thing. And the second thing that will determine this is what sort of sources of flat physical damage are available to players to use. Generally speaking, these sorts of damage multiplier effects, you'll find similar ones on Voidforge. Voidforge, the unique from the Uber Elder encounter, that gives you 300% of your physical damage added as a random element. Doomfletch Prism, and also Facebreaker is the other one that comes to mind. These weapons all stack very well with flat physical damage. So we'll have to see how the meta shakes out. The thing that would make this incredibly better would be if there's any change to, if there's any new sources of flat physical damage that really scale high. We had Cyclone added last league. Obviously, Cyclone wasn't a new skill, but it was transformed, and it had enormous amounts of flat physical damage on it. Obviously, that doesn't apply to a bow skill, to a unique bow. But I think it's the sort of thing to look for is, are any projectile skills changed to gain lots of flat physical damage? Assuming that there's no changes, I would just start this out as valuing it as a Master Cartographer Sextant in your loot filter, and then just be ready to reassess it. It may well be that if this is a league where Doomfletch Prism is good, if something changes and makes Doomfletch Prism better than dexterity stacking for bow users, then at that point you'll find that there'll be a tremendous demand for this card. And in that case, it may be something, you may end up putting this card on Divine Orb tier instead of Master Cartographer Sextant tier. But that's all up in the air. We'll have to see what happens. Next up we have the Eye of Terror, which is a divination card for a pure Chaeola Breachstone. No idea where this will drop. I assume it'll drop from fairly difficult content though, and as such not be something that's really repeat target farmable. Most access to zones divination cards are not something that are particularly target farmable in the current state of the game. So I'm expecting, that this will not be trivial to compile a set of. I think that if this drops in a map, that map will be much more popular this league. If this drops in a zone that is not target farmable, so for instance if it dropped in the beachhead, then it would make the beachhead considerably more valuable. We don't know where it's going to drop, and if it drops from an event, like for instance It That Fled encounters in maps, then it will make those more popular to farm. There's an insatiable demand for pure Chaeola Breachstones amongst players that are looking to push level 100 early in a league, and that will continue towards the end of the league as well. In terms of value, set this as being, this is going to be more than a Divine Orb and less than an Exalt in pretty much every league, and so I think you should just put it on your loot filter as though it was an Exalt and see what happens. It just comes down to where you draw the line between a Divine and an Exalt. I have different sounds for Divines and Exalts, and I put things that are over about 50 Chaos into my Exalt sound tier, and I'm expecting pure Chaeola Breachstones. This card will be around 50 Chaos all league. Next up we have the Price of Loyalty. This is my divination card. I've said a little bit about it elsewhere. In terms of price, I think expect it to be 1 to 2 Divine Orbs and set your loot filters accordingly, and we will see how it plays out throughout the league. If the card is from a popular farmed area, then I would expect that the price of premium Skin of the Loyals, like with 2 good implicit corruptions on them, and that ones that synergize with the colors of the gems, I'd expect that they will come down, 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 down. You might find that, say, one that is perfect for Vaal Fireball, that in previous leagues might have been 150 Exalts, might only be 20, and if that happens, then this divination card will fall hard in price as well. It is, of course, hard capped by a minimum of 1/4 of a divine. That's the lowest this can possibly be, and we'll end up seeing where it ends up. But I would start it as though it's a divine orb and reassess from there. The demon. This is really obvious. Give this your House of Mirrors sound, which for me is the same as my Exalt sound. But yeah, I'll let you make up your own mind on that. This is going to be the most expensive or the second most expensive divination card in the game next league, with House of Mirrors being the other one. Next up we have the deal for a random Cartography Scarab. Now, if we have a look at the prices of Cartography Scarabs, they have actually collapsed at the end of Legion League. And there's a reason for that. That is because there is a massive, massive oversupply of maps in the economy at the moment. Cartography Scarabs are at their best very early in a league. Very, very, very early in a league. When the sort of veteran players are just starting to get into the yellow and red tier maps on, say, day 2 or day 3 of a league, maps are very expensive, and so you can make an absolute killing if you're one of the first people. If you're miles ahead of the pack, you can make an absolute killing by selling maps to people who are behind you in progression, some of whom will have gotten lucky and had an Exalt drop, and you can then go and sell them perhaps, for a single Exalt, you might only need to give them 2 tier 16s or 3 tier 15s or 1 set of tier 14s. That's very early in the league. It doesn't last. Those prices don't last for very long. Now, what you can expect is that late in the league, as you can see here, Cartography Scarabs average 7 chaos. So a full set of this is only going to be 7 or 8 chaos, and so an individual card is just going to be 1.5 or so. However, early league, I think these are going to be considerably more expensive, and I would start these as a Master Cartographer Sextant on your loot filter, and then just adjust them over time as need be. The bargain for a random Pure Breachstone. This is a card where we don't know the weighting, and the weighting is going to be everything. 3 of the Pure Breachstones are not worth all that much. One of them is worth a little bit more. That's Ulnatol because it's a higher zone. And then, of course, Chayula is miles higher because it is a higher zone, has higher XP bonus, and also drops a lot more maps. And as well as that, it also drops more valuable unique items. So I'd expect that this card will be interesting. I don't know where it's going to end up price-wise because I don't know the weighting, but I would start this card as though it is somewhere between a Divine Orb and 2 Divine Orbs. And so for me, that means I will just start it with my Divine Orb sound, and you can then adjust it throughout the league. More is never enough. This is a set of 7 for a Gilded Scarab, a random Gilded Scarab. Now, currently there are 12 Gilded Scarabs, and they average approximately 17 Chaos Orbs. And the Legion Scarab is being added as well, which will probably not have much impact on the averages. In terms of the various Scarabs, Bestiary Scarabs have fallen hard late in the league, and as people have sort of finished a lot of the crafts that use the powerful beasts, and Gilded Sulphide Scarabs have gone up as people do their last second pushes into the Delve Mines. But generally speaking, all these prices are going to be fairly comparable next league. Divination and Cartography Scarabs are low at the moment because there's not much to point in doing dedicated farming so late in a league. Piranda Scarabs are high because there's a challenge related to them. So there's a few things going on there that change prices around. But broadly speaking, I think the average will remain about the same. So for that reason, I want to suggest that you start this out as having the same sound as an apprentice a journeyman cartographer sextant has in your loot filter, in the sort of 2 to 3 Chaos Orb range, and just reassess it over time. I think this is going to be a great card for the economy for a couple of reasons. Firstly speaking, there'll be a bunch of people doing, like a bunch of, you might term low-level traders that will be doing arbitrage on this card. If you have, say, 200 Chaos in a league, you might feel that one of the best ways you can build that up to 300 or 400 is by buying a bunch of these cards off people that are just selling them for 2 or 3 Chaos, buy them up, turn them in, and then sell Scarabs in bulk to people that want them. I think there probably will be a bit of a market for this, and maybe you need more than 200 Chaos in capital, maybe you might need more like 500, but then you'll be able to buy up a whole bunch of these cards and then turn them in and then be someone that is selling. You know, when someone wants six ambush scarabs, you've got 6 ambush scarabs to sell them, and you can therefore charge slightly more because they're only dealing with one person. So I think those players, those sort of lower level traders, those types that want to basically do grunt work for a bit of arbitrage value to turbocharge their currency in a league, they'll be the ones that benefit the most from this card. I do hope that it drops from a target farmable zone, because I think having more scarabs in the economy will make mapping feel a bit more fun. And particularly like some of the scarabs that just do zany things will be, you know, like for instance the torment scarabs are terrible, but things like the breach scarabs, the elder scarabs, the shaper scarabs, there's a niche for all of those. They're fun when you can use them and build a bit of an atlas strategy around them. Next up we have the Mountain. Now this is an interesting one. This is the second card that's been made for a jewel that has one mod already locked on it, for a magic jewel with one mod on it already. Potency is one that I've looked it up so that you don't have to, and it is for Global Critical Strike Multiplier, 9 to 12%. It's one of the most powerful suffixes you can get, and it's also a fairly rare roll, so it's a good start for crafting jewels. Most jewels that you go from here, you'll augment on. So when you augment it, you'll get a random prefix. And I'm just looking at a Crimson Jewel here. This does not specify that it's a Crimson Jewel. It might be a Viridian, it might be a Cobalt. I don't know if it can be a Prismatic Jewel or not. Time will tell on that front. But most of the rolls that you can augment onto it will be useful to some build. So, you know, you'll then... I mean, Chaos Damage less so, because most Chaos Damage builds don't scale Critical Strike, but pretty much everything else does. The only ones that are real stinkers are things like increased armor, but there's not an increased totem life more so, and chance to block. Those are stinkers, but mostly it's pretty good. So your Augment is probably going to be good on a jewel with this. Your Regal then is a total wild card and will often be terrible, and that is when you'll find out whether or not you have gotten a good jewel. But I think that this is actually quite a powerful little crafting tool, and being a set of 6, it's still going to be a pretty cheap divination card. I suggest that you start this with whatever sound, if any, that you apply to a fusing orb or a 6-socket item. Treat it at that sort of level in your divination card, in your loot filter. Do pick this card up, and every time you get a set, turn it in and augment it and see how you go. If you get something good, then regal it, and you know, you'll find, I think, that there'll be a lot more jewels going around, 3 mod good jewels with a potency suffix than there are at the moment, and this card will be the reason for them. In any case, I think this is interesting. This is a card that I initially dismissed, and then the more that I thought about it, the more I thought, no, this is actually going to be quite a good one to put together sets of. Lastly, we have the divination cards that were revealed at the initial launch. There is Akel's Prophecy for a fated unique item. The value of this card is entirely dependent upon how heavily weighted for or against getting the Atzri shield, Atzri's Reflection is. If Atzri's Reflection is staggeringly rare from this turn-in, then I would suggest that this divination card is not going to be very valuable. But it will be a bit of fun in solo self-found, where solo self-found players can then compile a set of this, turn it in, and then get an item that might be worth building a second character around. In trade leagues, though, I think that pretty much all of the faded items, with the exception of Atzri's Reflection, are reasonably cheap by the time that the league matures. Should still, however, be a lot of fun. And lastly, we've got Nook's Crown, which is going to be a multiple Exalt divination card for sure. Bone helmets that are elder items were already very lucrative. Item level 100 means that you can roll the Necromancer's Affix plus 3 to the level of socketed minion gems. But the absolute killer here is that this is a league in which minions are being overhauled And there's a lot of players that feel like there's a lot of players that will play whatever is new in a league, and so Necromancer is getting a huge overhaul. There'll be a lot of players that will play Necromancer because of that. So that's going to be a factor. That's going to drive popularity to Necromancer builds, even if they end up bad. Generally speaking, most of the character archetypes that GGG have introduced in recent years have been pretty strong. The one real notable exception would be the Delve League Summoner Guardian build, which didn't work very well, but it was playable. So there's been a whole number of these sorts of overhauls that have worked pretty well, and they're all been popular. Even the Summoner Guardian, which ended up not being good, people were still interested in attaining items for it during the Delve League, at least during the first few weeks. So for that reason, Nook's Crown, there's going to be a lot of demand for it. An Elder Bone Helmet is already good. Once you add in the ability to roll +3 to minion skills, it's very valuable. Elder Bone Helmets will not be the 50 exalts that they are in the current league. Well, that's for item level 86 ones. They won't be that expensive, but they will still have a fair price to them. I would suggest that you treat this as a 2 exalt card to start with, and then reassess later, but definitely have it set off your exalt sound in your filter. Ackle's Prophecy I didn't put a price on because I simply don't know, but I don't think it's going to be a super expensive card. I'm going to start this in my filter as a Master Cartographer Sextant, and then I will adjust it over the league. Okay, so that's all I've got on these new Divination cards for the moment. There's only going to be 3 more, so unless one of them is a real standout, then this will probably be my last video related to Divination cards until the league has come out. The only thing in the interim, though, that will happen, the Atlas will be launched at some point. If it's anything like last league, it'll be probably somewhere around Sunday or Monday over the upcoming weekend. And the Atlas will definitely impact some things related to Divination cards. Like that will impact Atlas strategies. At the moment, people run Tower because Tower has the Nurse Divination card in it. At the moment, people run all sorts of maps, like Burial Chambers. Be a terrible map, except for the fact that it has the Doctor in it. So, that's all I've got. If you've got any questions, definitely fire away below. Otherwise, I hope you have a good one.